coming back to you. Boy, am I excited to share this video. As you can see by the title, AMC, the final FUD killer. Is that a bit of exaggeration? I honestly don't think so. I think if you guys have followed me for a while, my longer term followers know I don't engage in like hype and clickbait. I try to let the facts really tell the story. And so you can tell how excited I am for what I saw in the data this time and what I'm going to share. If you've not been following me a while, every time we release an earnings report, I do a deep dive. So today is that deep dive, but I'm also going to offer a couple of very high level items here. And so just want to kind of really ask people to stick around for that final FUD killer. In fact, so that I know how YouTube works. Some of you are going to disappear as I get into the details. And so I just really encourage you. I'm going to show you the agenda here, and I encourage you in particular. You can see I'm highlighting that final FUD killer. So what I'm going to do, just so you know where that's coming, I'm going to go through the headlines. I'm going to do the deep dive I do every time. Some of you will remember the FUD Buster, the scorecard. We're going to go through that. I just really strongly encourage people to stick around for that final FUD killer. Or, I'll just tip my cards here. If you fast forward past the scorecard, then you're going to find that and find out why is he so excited? What's he going to share? You know what? Before I dive in, I didn't even pause and say hi, guys. It's been a little bit since I've been here on YouTube. Just very busy. This is the time of year where I have a series of reports I do for my company. I am an industry expert in supply chain. I deliver all these reports that kind of help give some people guidance and direction in the marketplace. And it makes a lot of money for my company, and I've got deadlines here, so I am very busy. Also, just on a fun personal note, I coach basketball, so right now I'm going to be actually coaching 2 basketball teams. So if you don't see me as much, please don't read into anything. I'm absolutely here, paying attention every day. Just life gets busy. So greetings. Hope you're all doing great. Happy Thursday. Happy day after AMC earnings release. To the GameStop apes, having fun tracking the growth of the power packs. I finally got my access, so I'm very excited to maybe let my kids try that. Probably post about that soon. And just hope you all have a great Thursday. Actually, on that note, I'm going to take a quick drink of coffee. We're on the West Coast here, so it's still coffee o'clock. Oh, Lord, I made that a little too hot, guys. You can't see me, but I was kind of grimacing. I put that in the microwave too long, warmed it up a bit too much. All right, so, and then we'll hit the summary after the final FUD killer. I really hope you'll stick around. I think it's very important. The reason I'm hitting that so much too is, pardon me, I saw all over X some significant FUD, and I mean, that's normal, right? We get attacked. We're going to get attacked until we win. Who knows, maybe even after we win. But particularly bad this time, a little bit egregious. And so I just want to arm you guys with the facts. And as I was looking at those, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the stake in the heart of the vampire that keeps trying to attack us. We got him. We got him, guys. So stick with me and see that. There's a reason I'm that excited to share that with you. So first, why don't I hit the headlines? Listen, if you didn't listen to the earnings call, go check if AMC posted a recording of that. I don't know if they did. I was on it live, even, as I said, I was busy. I was actually out taking my daughter on some errands and just listening in the car as I drove. And so these are the headlines I think I got, honestly, from this earnings that you're going to see in the details. Just kind of the top items. So the fact that we had gains in market share in the US in particular was just, man, that made me very, very, very excited to see. Love it. I think you all know, I've hinted at it a few times. Sometimes I've said it pretty openly that as we kind of have this balance of pricing for AMC and going premium, I want to see us still keep very heavy attendance and keep those market shares, not lose that out to some competitors, because it's not just the ticket prices we get. When people come, if they're buying merch and food and beverage, you're making a lot of money there too. And Adam and the team have just obviously hyper-focused on that. I'm very proud of them. And so to see gains in market share, and you're going to see in the details that while we're raising prices, that's phenomenal. To be kind of gaining on both sides of that, which is the second bullet. So gains in pricing, you're going to see that in the details I'm going to show you in a minute. I would just make sure you really understand one-time events, in particular the expenses. So we're going to see that in the details. I'm going to show you, but really keep in mind separating out what is, we had this refinancing event in the quarter, and that brought some expenses this time, some significant expenses. And so the shills are going to kind of just not bother to explain what only was a one-time thing. In other words, it's not going to repeat. It's not part of our business. You're not going to see it again, but it impacted this quarter. And so they'll try to make you believe, oh my gosh, things are going so bad, when you know that that expense is all done. It's in the rear view. We're never going to see it again. So you need to understand one-time events. That's a big headline from this quarter. And you need to understand what's non-cash as well. And we're going to go through that. I'm going to put in a quick plug for my tip jar, so to speak. I promise I'm going to do this in like 20 seconds and then move on because I don't like doing this either. But look, I mentioned how busy I am. I mentioned these reports. I mentioned that I'm coaching basketball. I've got 3 kids and a wife and just a life, right? Just like you guys. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't really have time to do this video today, but I saw that FUD. It made me really annoyed. You guys know I hate manipulation and distortion. And I just said, I got to do this. So this is going to mean I'm going to probably be working till like midnight tonight. That's going to be real tiring and kind of a bummer, to be honest. And so if any of you just appreciate that, some of you know I've got a buy me a coffee site. You can just see what the site is there. You could even just Google buy me a coffee stock retail. You can find me there. You know, I don't like to sort of plug for money, but I'm just going to be real honest. Today is going to be a bit of an exhausting day for me. And if you appreciate that and you appreciate the information I'm sharing, then I appreciate a tip back. So hopefully that's value and you decide you're interested in that. That's up to you. All right, without further ado, let's get to the details. Before I do this, this is the slide where some of you will go, whoa, this is a lot of information, and check out. So if you're new here, you can learn about balance sheets, and cash flows and income statements as I go through this. I have 2 masters in business. I'm going to show you how sometimes a business person thinks about things. I'm going to show you the results, go through that. And then also for some of you, don't miss that right after this slide, I'm going to get into that sort of what I'm calling the final FUD killer. So I really hope you'll stick around for this. I guess I've said that enough times. Let's go through. Many of you recognize this and will follow. I'll try to explain as we go for those who are new. So I look at let's call this a balanced scorecard. In business, you never want to get stuck managing just 1 or 2 things because you need a holistic view of your business. And so what you'll see on here is a mix of things that come from something called the balance sheet and a mix of things that come from the income statement. Both matter in business, and I know sometimes some of us get those confused. I see that online. They're not quite the same thing, but they tell you different pieces of the business. And people like Adam and Sean and the executive team at AMC are managing a holistic view of the business. So we go through, and I call this the FUD Buster because way back when it was Jim Chanos and some others. So you had billionaires kind of coming at us online. And you would see that all the way back in 2021, I've always taken this approach of facts over FUD. Let's look at the facts. Let's let the facts tell us what's happening. And the reason I bring that up then too, if you're new here, you can fact check every item I'm showing you here. This is all coming from AMC's earnings release that you can find on the SEC Edgar website, or you can find on the AMC Investor Relations website. I say around here, no trust me bros. So you do not need to trust me on these numbers. You can fact check these. So let's go through. All right, current assets. The original investment thesis was I can hold longer than you can stay solvent, shorty. And so the question has always been on AMC in particular, it's been this huge pitched battle, right, guys? That we have now fought online for a very long time. And we've seen all manner of lies and manipulation and distortion and all of that. Never disbelieve your eyes, guys. All of that has been real. And so the main thrust of the thesis was, would AMC ever go bankrupt? And so that is why front and center, I track our liquidity. Can we pay the bills? That's kind of what liquidity means, your solvency. Can we avoid somebody else saying, well, you're mine now because you couldn't pay my bills? And so the answer, I'm giving this a green, but you see the sort of downward yellow arrow on this one, and I'm going to talk that through. So we have $619 million of current assets. Now, what you need to know is there's some restricted cash in there. So there's a certain amount of cash, I think it was $51 million, that AMC has to set aside. Could be for different things like taxes or bills coming due. There are various other reasons. You kind of put cash in a lockbox and say there's a certain amount of cash we're going to have to set aside and can't touch this. So you could, if you wanted, take out $51 million from this number. I like to be very transparent with you all so that it's not hype. But that is cash that AMC does have. And in an extreme emergency, I'm sure they would do some extreme things with that. The reason for the downward yellow arrow is you note that we are down 22% year over year. So I'm showing you that number. That's one of the reasons I go through this scorecard every quarter as well. So it commits me to being fact-based and not hype-based. And it educates, I hope, all of my followers. But what I want you to notice and why I'm still calling this green, especially I'll sort of fast forward a bit, or tease forward. We're going to talk about cash flows. And if you if you have plenty of liquidity to cover a very long period of how your cash flows are going, then I'm calling that green. And AMC absolutely is good to go on that. That's not what the shills are telling you, right? So I'm going to prove what's going on by the end of this video. So stick with me. But I believe our liquidity is solid. We're good to go. $620 million. You'll note that, in this number that we're down year over year, there's some things that have happened, right? So it's not just that we're burning cash, and I want to make sure you understand that. First off, from the same moment last year till now, we had paid down $60 million of debt. So that is cash out the door to pay down the debt. I suppose some of that was equitized, some of that was flipped to shares. And that's a little misleading too. Like, honestly, in terms of my feeling, we've paid down more debt than that. But because of the refinance, and then because we've got some more debt we're going to be paying off, go back to the vote videos and all of that. Pretty soon here, we're going to have a more significant decrease in debt. But just if you look at the borrowing line from the balance sheet last year versus this year, we're at $60 million down. Don't sleep on the fact that in that year, we've made significant capital expense investments, CapEx. That's basically strategic investments. Think about how we've put in lasers, we've put in new IMAX and Dolby and AMC XL screens. So Adam and team we're more on the offense, right? So we're not just trying to survive, we're actually investing to grow. And so some of those investments, well, that's cash out the door. So if you're down in cash, but you've been making investments that are going to bring in new revenues, that's not red to me. That's still green. And then we've been over time paying down our deferred rent as well. So that number has been going down. So that's why current assets, really, it's just we've got plenty of cash for our run rate with our cash flows. And you're going to see that by the end of the video. So good to go there. On attendance, here I feel really good. I do. And Adam would tell you I'm in his DMs if he's reading them. I don't know for sure. I know he reads some of our DMs, but he's a very busy man, and I'm sure he gets an awful lot of DMs. Can't stay up with all of them. If he has seen my DMs, he knows I'm pretty hyper focused on attendance. I do not want to see us losing market share, and I don't want to see us outprice ourselves out of the market. In his I don't even want to say defense. That's too negative of a word. I would say kudos to him and Sean and the team. As much as I have had some concerns, I would say thus far, Adam and team have been right. I think they're proving themselves right in the face of, even me asking questions from time to time. Thank you, Adam, for putting up with those. If you've seen those, I just care about our shared win. So here's the point. Look at attendance now. Yes, we're down year over year, right? So I'm showing you that we're down 10%. But the box office was down 11%. So that actually means those market share gains Adam talked about. That in terms of just butts in seats, the amount of people who came in, even on a down box office, we had more people. And if you really think about, too, that we had higher pricing this year, too, it's a significant gain in terms of, in relative terms. And so what happens then, if the box office, bounces back a bit, then we start to see some real nice, some real bright spots in our results. Give me a second. I'm going to take a drink of coffee here. All right, that's not so hot this time. That's a little better. Okay, so point being, Adam said on the earnings call, we had market share gains. You can see it in the numbers in that are just pure volume-based, how many people come was not down as much as the box office, which means we took market share from others. Okay, food and beverage, given that sort of a gray box here. Now, let me go back too on the attendance, just to really underscore what I'm saying is when we have some of those real big quarters, like think next year when we've got Star Wars and Avengers and, just some of the really, really big movies, Mario, things like that. If we kind of keep some of this market share, you're going to see some really nice results as we gain attendance. Okay, so that is my hope. I do believe that part of that also has to do with the discounting, the half off Wednesdays and the half off Tuesdays. And then part of that has to do with the premium offerings that we have now. So just really great job by the team on that. That's why that's green. Food and beverage. So gave this one a gray. Can't quite call it green, but I don't want to call it red either. And let's talk through why that is. So we are down a little over 9% in net revenue. Now you saw the box office was down 11%. So our net revenue is not down as much as the box office. So that tells me that's why that's not red. But I do see a couple of things in there that, okay, we got to just say what's going on. If you note here, I guess a couple things in case some of you are new. I measure the net revenue of food and beverage, not the top line revenue. The top line revenue was only down, I think, maybe even like 7.9%. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if I'm remembering correctly. I cobble together all the information before I make these videos. And of course, sometimes I won't remember all the numbers. Um, and so at the top line, our top line revenue of food and beverage was actually pretty decent. But what I measure is the bottom line because, while AMC has inflation on the amount we can charge consumers, we also have inflation on our costs, right? There's costs behind our food and beverage. We've got to buy the materials, the supplies, et cetera, et cetera. And so we did have some margin erosion. We had a little bit, but now what I want to say is that is not, I'm not calling this red because there's nothing that scares me there. That honestly could even be something like mix. I'll make this up. Like, let's say last year somebody bought donut holes and this year they're buying pizza or something. And I don't know the difference in the margins on those, but let's just pretend that the donut holes had a higher margin at the bottom line than the pizza. And so if you have a different mix, maybe we even offered different stuff. Like, I don't know, last year we had just the pretzel bites, but now we have the big Bavarian pretzels, those kinds of things. It just can have to do with mix. It doesn't necessarily mean that AMC is seeing cost pressures. So I want to just be careful that I'm not telling you guys I'm concerned about like rising costs or something. What I'm just saying is whether through mix or costs or whatever is going on, we had a little bit lower margin than last year. And even I'll say, I think there's something to do with attendance too, and I mean the box office in this case. If you go back and look like at Q1, we had a really rough box office, right? You're going to have some spoilage on food. So if you don't get enough people coming and you didn't get it right on your sort of supply chain side in terms of inventory, if you had too many donut holes and some get old and go bad, you got to throw those away and you still had the cost with no revenues. So your margin takes a hit. Pun intended, there's a bite out of your margin. So there's no concern here. That's why I call this gray. But just so you know, and just so I'm being transparent and real with the facts, we did see some margin erosion on food and beverage. I bet we see a real nice gain overall in Q4 here. I think it's going to be a nice quarter. And so we were down $37 million at the bottom line on food and beverage. But note the little kind of shiny object here, the light in the dark or whatever, the per person, we're up 3%. So the actual spending per person, I think it was $774 if I remember right. That was up over last year. So people are spending more when they come, and that's nice to see. So I bet if we just have a bigger box office, get more people, have less spoilage, stuff like that, I think that's going to do well. All right, so admissions, the biggest part of our business, very important. That reminds me, I guess you guys can't talk back to me, but somebody remind me to talk about other revenue before I'm done. But anyway, so admissions, we were down 29 million, but really, really take note. So now we're talking about that market share gain again, because what did I tell you? The box office was down 11% year over year. Okay, we had a lower box office in the quarter. Effectively, September was just, there kind of was nothing in September. And then you guys also know I complained a little bit at Hollywood because I think it was our 4 biggest movies were all released within 5 weekends of each other. They didn't really have much room to breathe on the blockbusters. If you look at like F1 and Fantastic Four and Superman and Jurassic World, those 4 came out, I think, in 5 weekends. So each one mostly just had 1 week before the next blockbuster came out. I'd love to see Hollywood think that through a little bit differently. Maybe offer counter programming in between. I don't know. I'm no expert on the box office. I'll leave those guys to figure that out. But that was my point of view, that between those not having as much room to breathe and then September just, now look, we got some awesome surprises in terms of like Weapons and Conjuring and Demon Slayer. Those were amazing. So don't let me FUD you. But, September was a little lighter. So the box office was down 11%, but AMC's admissions only down 3%. So we almost hit a flat number year over year. How fantastic is that on a lower box office? So again, I'll continue to call you to what do you think happens when the box office actually grows, right? We're going to see significant growth. And so that was driven by, you can see at the bottom here, market share gains, plus then our ticket prices were up 84 cents a person, guys, which was 7% year over year. And you're starting to see kind of almost like compound, people call it CAGR, compound annual growth rate. You're starting to see compounding growth of every year the ticket price is climbing. Adam got some questions on how long is that possible with sort of the consumer tightness. If you follow me on X, I've got a point of view around consumer debt, that it's not healthy in the country right now. And so there's definitely an issue with the consumer. Walmart feels that, Target feels that. You're starting to see some signs of that. Maybe you follow Chipotle, you saw that their business was down. So there will come a point where there's only so much pricing increase unless the economy improves and the jobs market improves, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, AMC just is showing a lot of strength in terms of the consumer saying, no, I want to go see these movies. I want to see them in premium formats. And here's what I'll tell you too. The AMC beat my, I should have added in here. A lot of times I'll show you guys my forecast accuracy, and I will tell you, I had only forecast, I believe, 1198 a person, but AMC hit 1225 a person. Now, my assumption was we have the half off Wednesdays that we've added, and we pushed harder marketing messaging on the half off Tuesdays. So I thought, all right, that half off day is going to sort of drag on our pricing, but it's great because we get this discount consumer who might not have come. We've driven up attendance, and we've driven up food and beverage and merch sales, right? So I loved it and do love it. But I was wrong. AMC beat me on price. Hit 1225 a person, even with the half off stuff going on. So that even tells you then we're hitting two extremes, and in marketing, I think that's really fantastic personally, where we're getting this discount consumer and bringing them into our ecosystem, let's call it, and we're getting this premium consumer and keeping them in our ecosystem, and now getting those market share gains. So I think it's going really, really well on admissions. Just bottom line on that one, basically flat on a down box office is fantastic. We delivered. All right, so assets versus liabilities. Now we're back to the balance sheet. I'm just measuring basically AMC's balance sheet health over time. We want to see our assets be larger and our liabilities going down. It just means like you've got more, investments and good things on your side, let's call it, and you've got less debt and future payments on I don't want to call it the bad side, but you guys get it. So we are kind of the wrong way year over year. I'm giving that a grade because you can see that 0.37%. That's basically flat. So I'm not going to call it red. We're not like just sort of desperately going the wrong way, anything like that. And the thing you need to note, look at the note at the bottom. So we have had closures year over year. And so you've got sort of less, I don't know what all assets we get to count, like in terms of the projectors and the screens and the properties and the seats and all that stuff. But overall, I think some of the asset reduction, which changes the math on your assets divided by liabilities, we've had some closures still year over year. The team has continued to trim and to try to only have properties that are significantly profitable. And so I applaud them for that, but that is shifting the math on the assets versus liabilities. It will start shifting the other way, especially as we start making more regular profits. But so flat year over year on that, and I would like to see improvement over time. And I believe we will. All right, so the next one, bottom left here, operating expense as a percent of revenue. Now, we did see a decline. In other words, we went the wrong way on that year over year. But here are some things that I believe on that. So first off, when the box office is lower, this is just a fact. This is not even I believe. This is a fact. When the box office is lower, because of AMC's operating leverage, which you've heard Adam talk about many times, our operating expense as a percent of revenue gets worse. But the other side of that coin is as the box office grows, Adam reminded you yesterday about 2/3 of incremental revenue drops to EBITDA, or if you want to measure all the way down to net income, there's some large amount that goes there too. And so as the box office improves, you will see our operating expenses not climbing as fast as our revenues. And that is what you want in finance. You want expenses growing slower than revenues, right? If you grow the top line faster than your expenses, then more of that difference flows through to the bottom line. I hope you can kind of just hear that. So we are worse year over year, but keep in mind, again, the box office was down 11%. And so some of our, I say this many times, but I know I get new followers. So for example, if you have rent on a property, or say you have a general manager at that property, whether you have one movie or 1,000 movies, you're paying that rent and you're paying that general manager. So their expense as a percent of one movie, you can just hear, is a lot higher than their expense if you had 1,000 movies as a percent. So the more movies we get and the more box office we get, our expenses as a percent of revenue are going to go further and further down, which just means higher profits. And so I cannot call us green on this because we did go the wrong way. But again, keep in mind, the box office down 11%. is mostly what's driving that. And then I believe, here's the believe part. I can't promise you that I'm right here. That number, I will admit, was a little higher than I forecast. That operating expense line was a little higher than I forecast. I think that's also partly, I think some of the one-time events are in there. I can't promise you that because some of that shows up in other lines as well, like borrowing and investment expenses and some other things. But I think I'd like to see Q4. Let's put it that way. I'd like to see our operating expense in Q4 and see if perhaps it comes back in line with my expectations. So it's not red. I think it's mostly box office driven, but we can't call that one green either. All right, free cash flow. Big deal. Lock in, chat. You need to listen to this part. This is important. It's going to tie to the rest of the video. Notice that our free cash flow was actually better year over year. We're up $11.1 million for you sort of, I don't know, decoders and, I don't know, some folks like something called angel numbers or whatever. If you're into numbers, 11.1, that's kind of fun. So we've improved $11.1 million year over year. And we had a negative $81 million of free cash flow, right? So I want to just be upfront and transparent. We did have negative free cash flow. And the shills are trying to jump all over that and actually trying to report a far worse number through some black magic that they're doing, which I'm going to kill that black magic, okay? Give me a minute. We're going to get to that real soon. But just notice the commentary here at the bottom of this one. Better cash flows. We beat last year. That's the up $11 million on a lower box office. So if the box office was down 11%, funny to hear all these 11s today, right? I'm not making this up. These are numbers. You can go fact check all of this. Anyway, so the box office was down 11%, but our free cash flow was up $11 million. That means we had better cash flow on a lower box office. And here's what else I want you to know. Note this note at the bottom here. That I guess I said always here. I suppose I can't say always, but historically, Q4 has, let's put almost always, had better cash flows than Q3. Adam has even told us Q1 and Q3 are tough on AMC's cash flows. Q2 and Q4 are a lot nicer. And so what I want you to just hear is if we're going to have probably better cash flows in Q4, and we already just saw improvement year over year, even on a lower box office, you should just be generally happy about what's probably coming in Q4 cash flows. Hold that thought. I'm going to come back to that. All right, so accounts payable and accounts receivable. This is another item I track from the balance sheet. And generally, I'll just explain it real quick for the new followers here. Accounts payable is sort of think like your credit card bill. You know the bill is coming. You're able to kind of float that. You haven't had to have cash go out of your checking account yet, but there is a bill floating out there. You're going to have to pay it. It's payable. Okay, accounts receivable is the opposite. Somebody else owes you money. They just haven't paid you yet. So this impacts your cash flows. It's impacting the timing of when money's going out the door and when money's coming in the door. And what you need to see, so then, is our accounts payable year over year is up. This is actually a good thing, guys. I mean, I can't black and white say it's a good thing, but let me explain why generally here in this conversation it's good. Our accounts receivable is down. Well, in general, that means we've been able to keep more money on our side in both of these. So on the receivable side, you could say maybe we've collected faster, or we just have less bills due to us because they've been paid. And on the payable side, we've been able to pay out slower. So we've got, in both cases, more cash in our account. So that's what I'm saying. Receivable decreasing. Sorry for the typo. That's not a decode. That's probably been in there for a few quarters because I don't remember typing that today. But anyway, receivable decreasing while payable is up is kind of improving your cash flow, which you see here, right? So that's part of this free cash flow being better than last year, besides a whole lot of other things in the operations that the guys probably managed really well. All right, our total net loss or gain. Now, I just, I acknowledge, hey, I gave that one a big fat red arrow, but you notice I didn't call the box red, and let's talk that through after a sip of coffee here. All right. So yes, we lost almost $300 million, but remember some really important things. First of all, there's a lot of non-cash expenses. If you have followed me before, you know that the bottom line, something called net income, includes things like depreciation and other non-cash expenses. For example, every quarter now, we're paying $19 million in our income statement to NCMI, who, remember the advertisements and all of that before the movie, and that was kind of a whole thing. So AMC is paying almost, it's 18.6. We're paying almost $19 million a quarter to NCMI, but it's not cash. It's a non-cash expense. And then you've got depreciation and some other, and this quarter in particular, note the call out here, driven by financing one-time events. There's some of those financing events that was cash out the door. And I'm going to show you all of this. That was real, but there's a lot of it too that's non-cash. So the shills come out and, AMC is losing $300 million and only has $600 million. And so they only have cash for 2 quarters. None of that is true at all. I'm going to kill that completely. I'm going to arm you with the facts. But I also like, again, being transparent and saying, look, you don't love and I don't love, being $278 million worse than the same quarter last year. But it happened. And so we got to talk about it. But again, when I say one-time events, here's why I really want you to understand that. And I suppose I've hit it already, so I'll make it quick this time. But it's not happening again. We refinanced. That's done. We recognize sort of the expenses involved with that. And some of that, by the way, guys, is because on some of the fees and the ways it worked out and some of the interest we had to pay, AMC had to effectively take a loss on some of our debt. It cost us more to pay off the debt than the amount of debt we paid off. So you have to book that as a loss. And I've already covered that in various videos. I think it's part of sort of the settlement. Go back on other videos about the refinancing and all of that where I discuss that so that I don't bore you guys with that today. But we had to take a bit of a loss on some of our debt payoffs. And that shows up as, again, a one-time event that a lot of that's just on paper. And it's not all cash. And so let's look at the bottom line and let's finally get to that stake in the heart of the FUD. I'm going to do that in a minute. So we had our one-time events, the refinancing, that's skewing results. I just covered all of that. That's got also some non-cash expenses. And my point is, if you take out the one-time events and you really compare the same business last year versus the same business this year, and don't sort of muddy the waters with what happened in refinancing, then we are way, way, way better this year than we were last year. And that is great to see. All right, so we had market share gains. So, and by the way, on that point I just made, that's where I'm saying you really want to understand what's happening in the true operations. What's actually happening in the business, not in financing and all this other stuff. How's the business going? And that's why you want to measure this balanced scorecard. And that's why you saw, hey, wait a sec, we gained market on attendance. Hey, wait a sec, we've still been able to raise prices. When the attendance comes back, actually our food and beverage is going to be going the right way. We improved our cash flows even on a down box office. That's what's happening in your business, okay? And I'm going to show you in a minute why we have near infinite cash. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's why it's important to understand the one-time events and that in many ways you take those out if you're a real, more sophisticated financial person, and you can assess what's the real business year over year and not this other noise. All right, so we had our market share gains. That's part of our bottom line for sure. And I'm just saying, hey, that's not only driven by premium, that's driven by discount. And so I think there's a chance that Adam and team are winning the consumer both at the top and the bottom. And to have both consumers, I think is really fantastic. Let's see what they feel over time. He didn't talk a lot about the discount Wednesdays and Tuesdays. He talked a little bit about it in the call. Again, I encourage you, if that recording is out there, go listen to him, not me. But he did talk about it a little. And so I'm just leaving room for him and the team to assess that over time and make sure that they feel it's the right business strategy, and I trust them. So far, I'm personally pretty excited about that one. All right, so another kind of headline, let's call it, or bottom line, lower box office year over year, I think is masking our efficiency. So that's where I talked about our operating expense as a percent of revenue. If we had a higher box office, you're going to see that operating expense kind of become less and less percent of our revenue, and our earnings will continue to improve. Don't miss that capital expenses, I'm calling it with the promise of future results, are kind of front loaded. So here's what I mean by that. If AMC implements a new IMAX screen, there is a cost to that, right? And there is, I'm going to guess most of that expense is sort of upfront. Now you do something called depreciation and amortization, so you can recover that expense, but that's just sort of a tax write-off. We've covered that here on my channel before. But in general, the reason I'm highlighting that is some of our expenses lately, in the Go plan, right? Some of our expenses have been happening and some are even done. Adam said something yesterday about some of the IMAX stuff being kind of on the home stretch or the final stretches or whatever. Some of those expenses will kind of be done. And then you're going to start to see, well, okay, but now we're starting to bring in the revenue, right? We're starting to have people come watch Sinners. Think about how amazing that did at IMAX. People are going to come watch Avatar, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you are done with the expenses, we've been reporting those and sort of dragging on our results. But now we get to the fun part of not having the expenses as much, at least. I'm not an accountant, and I don't know to what extent they've already recognized all the expenses. There might be more. So just don't let me FUD you there either. But in general, I think a lot of the expenses are done, and now we start having the revenues. So we're in the out quarters as we especially round into 2026 and beyond. I think we're going to see some really, really nice results. I'm very excited for that. All right, and then do not miss that our cash flow is improving and is even positive. So finally, let's get to the most important part of this video, I think, today. Let's kill FUD once and for all. This is really important that you know this. And by the way, I'm going to show you where to even look at this in a minute. I'm going to literally jump out of this PowerPoint and I'm going to show you the earnings releases themselves and prove this to you. Okay? So this is where we kill all the shills. I would even say go out and post all this to them today and just shut them down. So the actual cash impacts, people are talking to you about, oh my gosh, AMC's burning money and whatever. Here's what you need to know. And I'm going to show you this hard sourced, literally show you to your own eyes in a moment. At the end of Q1, now first off, remember what a terrible box office that was. There is no sugarcoating it. Hollywood did not give us enough movies. That was a really rough box office. I think that was just leftover, I call it air bubbles in the pipes from the strike. When you turn off your water to your house, when you turn it back on, yes, water comes right away, but also you end up having all these air bubbles out of the pipes, sort of a lack of supply, let's say. I think Q1 of this year was a bit of an air bubble hangover from the strike, and it was a really rough quarter. In that rough quarter, we had cash burn of $253 million at the bottom line. And if you look from operations, which I always tell you guys is very important to measure our cash from operations, it's kind of like what was the impact of having your doors open. We actually burned even more. We burned $370 million in the first quarter. Now, so far this is sounding like FUD, isn't it? I promise you, this is getting real good. There's a reason I set that up as that bad quarter too. In the next 6 months combined, but let me come back actually too, and I'm going to show you this in a minute. When I said our cash from operations burn was actually higher than our total burn, that tells you we had financing activities. And I'm going to show you how to look at cash flows in just a moment. And so we burned all this cash, but we improved it by kind of bringing in money from financing activities. Well, that's kind of debt, isn't it? And some things like that, and selling shares and stuff like that. That's dilution or debt. So we softened the blow because Q1 was tough. But now, the next 6 months combined, so that was the first 3 months. The next 6 months combined, our total cash burn, this is what the shills are lying to you about and totally twisting and manipulating and distorting. We've only burned $10 million in the 6 months since then. Now, let's go back a minute. What did I tell you was our current assets? Let's call it $620 million. And in the last 6 months, we've only burned 10. Think about how many quarters it would take at, I don't know, so if that's $5 million a quarter, how many quarters to get to $620 million? What is that, 34 quarters? And that's if you didn't turn around and start making more money, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And now, in those 6 months, our net cash from operations is actually a positive $124 million. Yes, in the last 6 months, operations has contributed positive $124 million. So we went from a total cash burn of 253 in 3 months. The next 6 months, we only added to our cash burn. Still burn. I'm being honest about that. But of only $10 million in 6 months. And some of that is because of financing activities. Because what did I just tell you? Operations actually contributed $124 million. So I guess I've kind of hit, I had these pop-ups to make sure I highlighted this stuff. Sometimes I just make sure that I've got something to remind me. But I've hit these pop-ups, right? So the $10 million in 6 months, operations is generating cash for 6 months now. So let's go to the source, right? So this was just also to remind me. Let me just show you guys. I'm going to prove this to you. So I am going to show you, I've told you many times, go to the SEC Edgar website. I think if I go back, let me just show you guys how you can just do this for yourself. So you go to SEC Edgar and you notice I can just go right here, type AMC, submit. Okay. It brings up AMC's filings. Sorry guys, I should have picked the right AMC. That's why that site looked weird. AMC Entertainment, okay? Give that a second. All right, and you notice on the right here, here's your 10Ks and 10Qs. These are all your quarterly filings, okay? And so what I've got open, notice that this says, so I don't know if it's, hopefully it's big enough on your screen, at the top right here, says 3 months ended, okay? And you can notice that this was March 31st. So you know that I'm looking here at our Q1 filing. This was that old Q1 filing, which you just see right here, was filed May 7th, right? So that was our first earnings call. May 7th, filed that. March 31st is, so Q1 is January 1st through March 31st. So I'm going to show you, you'll notice I'm down here, I've scrolled down. What is this? The condensed consolidated statements of cash flows. You can go find all the information for yourself in our filings on our cash flows. And I'm about to show you, and I'm going to prove to you that we've only burned $10 million in 6 months. And then you'll notice, this is how I'm going to prove it to you in a minute, because now here's the other filing I've opened. You can see this is the 9 months ended. So this is important that you understand. As cash flow goes through the year, this is kind of a running tally. So it's not just quarter by quarter, it's actually adding all the quarters together. So this is showing you 3 quarters combined now, because we filed 3 quarters as of yesterday. So this is as of the end of September 30th. How is the whole 9 months gone? And we're going to take the difference between those, right? Because what's 9 months minus 3 months? Well, that's 6 months. So I'm going to show you what happened between March 31st and September 30th, those 6 months, right? So here's how you can look at this. Now, there's a lot of stuff on here, and you're like, okay, what all is this? Let's not make this a long educational video. I'll just say, so you go from your bottom line. You're always going to see like a loss or gain here at the top. Then it starts, I always tell you guys, there's all this non-cash stuff, right? So here's depreciation and amortization. Notice that this is actually adding money back in. So to get to your cash flows, you got to take out all the non-cash stuff. So if that was negative, you flip it positive. If it was positive, you flip it negative, like here. Gain on derivative liability. Well, now this is a negative. That's probably Hycroft, guys. I'm not positive about that, but those warrants are derivatives. And so you can see AMC had to take some money out on some kind of derivatives we owned. So you get all the way down, and here's the actual cash impact. Let me skip to that. Notice this blue line, net cash used in operating activities. Remember, why don't we just go back and forth so you can see the whole no trust me bros, right? I always tell you, I'm taking this straight from the filings. Why don't we prove that? So I said net cash from operations, 370 million. Sure enough, here's an AMC filing from the SEC website, net cash from operations, 370 million, right? So you already know, okay, the guy's just telling me what he got straight up from the filing. That is not our whole cash flow though. Remember that I said, so that's operations, which is nice, right? You can go find out what was our actual business doing. Then you can scroll down and notice there's cash flows from investing. Notice this capital expenditures, right? So we spent money. What did I tell you a minute ago? We're spending money building IMAX screens and replacing seats and replacing projection with lasers. And I believe that will bring in money. Well, we already had to spend money. This is cash that went out the door, right? So Adam and team had to say, well, we had cash we spent on investments. Hey, that investment is done. Now we get to just sort of enjoy the fruit of our labor and start to see money coming in. You guys should be excited about that, right? We don't have to keep spending money putting in an IMAX screen if we already put it in, right? That expense is done. You guys get that. All right, then you have cash flows from financing. And you will see, look at this, bottom line, net cash provided used in financing activities, 158 million. So in Q1, it looks like it was dilution, right? So net proceeds from equity issuances. And this is where people, they get all mad at Adam, and it's like, well, Hollywood didn't give us the movies in Q1. We burned $370 million. Adam made sure we survived and brought in more money. Okay? So this is why I've had his back the whole way. Survive, then thrive. He has made sure that his shareholders have not taken a bath on bankruptcy. And I applaud him for that, and I'm deeply grateful to him for that, and always will be. All right, so you just go bottom line. You can get all the way down here. This line here. Watch this. Net decrease in cash and cash equivalents and restricted cash. 253 million. So let's go back. What did I tell you? Total cash burn, 253. Whoops. And so now this is really going to matter, because now we get to take the difference. So if that was March 31st, let's remind ourselves, right? 3 months ended March 31st. Hang with me, guys, because I'm going to summarize this at the end, and this is absolutely going to 100% kill the FUD you're seeing online today. All right, so this time on, I just skip all the way to the bottom. So now remember, this is in 9 months. So that 9 months includes our first 3 months I just showed you. So we want to get to what's the difference over the 6 months in between. Well, cash flows from that's investing. Let's go up here. Where did we go? Net cash used in operating activities. Here we are. So minus 246 million. Now wait a second. So I've even actually, I've kind of overstated. We didn't even lose as much money as I said. So net cash used in operating activities, 246. But wait a second. Net cash used in operating activities was 370. Oh no, I did get it right. So the first quarter we lost 370. In the next 6 months we moved from 370 to 246. Now what did I tell you? We actually gained in those 6 months. Operating, being open in Q2 and Q3, it contributed positive cash flows of 124 million. And I believe that's actually going to be even bigger in Q4. Let's watch that. In fact, in a minute here, I'm going to show you, I think, what happened last year. Okay, and then I told you, we've got those capital expenditures, right? We've been investing in IMAX screens and all that. I don't have to keep saying that. But you can see, in our 9 months this year, we've spent $163 million on investing. I don't know also if, Adam talked about this Nova Sky Stories. That was a little bit new to me, that we had some investment in that. I didn't catch the number. I'll have to go see if I can find that. And so that could be some of our investment as well. But bottom line, you can see we've had expenses on investments for the year. And again, you should be celebrating because at some point those expenses start to be done and you reap the benefits from it. So go all the way to the bottom. Net decrease in cash and cash equivalents for the 9 months is 264 million. But you go, okay, wait a minute. You told me at 3 months in, we were minus 253. And now at 9 months in, 264. So I guess, okay, this is where there's no trust me, bros. I should have said that we burned 11 million. All right, let's correct it on the fly. There we go. Okay, so our total cash burn in 6 months is actually 11 million. Let me just hammer that point home. We went from March 31st, we had burned 253. And by September 30th, we'd burned 263. Now, I am seeing shills out there talking to you about burning like $200 or $300 million and all that. Baloney. Our cash has shifted only $11 million in 6 months, and it's not because of financing and all that. In fact, the financing costs were not so great. Because look at this. In the total 9 months, net cash provided by financing, 134. But we actually lost money on financing those 6 months. Because look at, as of March 31st, we had provided $158 million to our cash flows from financing. But we're down. We're down in the 6 months in financing, which means what I talked to you about, those one-time expenses for the refinance. We have had some, and there's interest payments. So some of that could just be our debt payments and interest payments, all that stuff. You can even see, like, look at this. Scheduled principal payments. That's been $15 million on the year. So I don't know what was the difference from Q1. That's about another 10 million. But here's the point. A shill might say, oh, yeah, fine. You just kind of rescued your cash with a lot of dilution and refinancing of debt, bringing in maybe more debt. Not true. So actually, in the 6 months, we went down on our cash from financing activities. We went up on our cash from what? Operations. Our operations are now providing positive cash flows. You really, really need to understand that. And then when you think about what's coming, so let's kind of just hit sort of the last stake in the heart of all this. If I just said in the last 6 months, and I just proved to you with the filings, we've only burned $11 million, and that actually from operations, we've contributed $124 million without selling any stock, without having to bring in more debt, and while paying off debt and while investing in new IMAX screens. What do you think is coming? Right? So now think about this. First, I want to remind you that even quarters seem to be better than odd quarters. Adam has told us that in the earnings call. I'm seeing it in the results. Q1 and Q3 seem to be tougher on cash flows. I think it has to do with the timing of AMC's bills. And then, of course, with Q1 generally being lighter. But remember what that means. Q4 is coming. Now, what did I just show you? I showed you the last 6 months of results, but that's with Q4 now coming. And here's what you need to think about from last year's Q4. Last year's Q4 was smaller than this year's. Last year was about 2.3 billion box office, and this year is going to be about 2.5. Last year, our free cash flow was $114 million in that one quarter alone. And by the way, cash from operations, I think, might have even been better than that. I got to go double check that. Um, and so, what did I just tell you? In 6 months, we made $124 million. I wouldn't even be surprised if we beat that whole number here in just Q4 and not only contribute from operations, but have kind of bottom line free cash flow. So, Q4 is better in general, and this Q4 is better than last Q4. And last Q4 had significant positive cash flows. So, I would just say there are three things that you can kill this cash burn FUD with once and for all. First off, in the last 6 months, we've only burned $11 million while we have $620 million of liquidity. And in those 6 months, we contributed $124 million from operations, not from debt, not from stock sales, from just having our doors open and running our business. And then Q4 tends to be a better quarter cash flow wise. I think it must have to do with AMC's business model and how we close out the year, and we sort of get to kind of run that downhill race at the end of the year. And I'm sure Adam and team kind of enjoy as big blockbusters are coming in, and what that's going to look like in terms of cash flows. And I know I said there were three things to say, but maybe that's it. So just we have plenty of liquidity, our cash flows have been fine, and better cash flows are coming. And then really think through at the bottom line. When you remove one-time financing activities, we had better results on a lower box office. We had market share gains. I just showed you how we've had positive cash flows, and we have an even brighter future. Guys, it's so obvious. We will win. Let's go.